Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Continuing on our journey around the confidence wheel, this is Spoke 3 on the confidence wheel, family relationships. Before we begin, I'd like you to do something for me. If you're comfortable doing so, I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment. Picture your child. Picture their face, their smile, the things that make them uniquely them. Now think about the last really good moment you had together. Perhaps it was a cuddle, a joke, a conversation in the car, a bedtime story, a moment when you felt deeply connected. Now think about the moments that are harder, the arguments, the battles, the shouting, the guilt, the moments when you walk away and think, that wasn't the parent I wanted to be. Let me know in the chat how many people here have ever lost your temper with your child and felt guilty afterwards. If that's you, just type yes in the chat. Thank you. You are not alone. Because parenting is hard, and parenting neurodivergent children can be even harder. And relationships can easily become dominated by correction. Put your shoes on. Turn the screen off. Do your homework. Stop arguing. Brush your teeth. And before long, family life can begin to feel like one long to-do list. Today I want to convince you of one thing. Relationships matter, because children are far more likely to accept our influence when they feel connected to us. And understanding that changes everything. Oh, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Harry Woodward. I'm a children's health consultant paediatrician, and I talk about this with families all the time. This is the third spoke on the confidence wheel framework that we are journeying around, family relationships. So why do family relationships matter so much? Because relationships sit at the heart of everything. Relationships influence behavior, how children act and respond. They influence emotional regulation, control and calm. They influence confidence. They influence self-belief and resilience. And perhaps, most importantly, relationships influence how children see themselves. I often say that children see themselves reflected in the eyes of the adults who care for them. And over time, children begin to believe the stories they hear about themselves. Whether that's, I'm difficult, I'm naughty, I'm always getting things wrong, or I'm loved, I am capable, I can do hard things. Let me know in the chat how many people here have ever reached the end of a difficult day and realized that most of your interactions with your child have involved correction. Type yes if that's you, because you're not alone. When family life becomes stressful, relationships can easily become dominated by demands, reminders, and corrections. I remember one parent saying to me, I feel all I ever do is tell my child off. And I suspect many parents recognize that feeling. But children are far more likely to accept our influence when they feel connected to us. And connection is not a luxury. Connection is the foundation. I remember meeting one family who described home life as constant conflict. Arguments every morning, arguments after school, arguments at bedtime. Everybody was exhausted. The parents felt they were failing. The child felt constantly criticized. The whole family felt stuck. And as we explored things together, something became clear. Nobody was bad. Nobody was failing. Everybody was overwhelmed. So we started small. 10 minutes of special time each day. No instructions, no correction, no teaching, simply connection. And over time, something remarkable happened. Conflict reduced. Communication improved, and one parent said, "I feel like I've got my child back." Relationships change everything. If I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this. Children are far more likely to accept our influence when they feel connected to us. So if relationships matter so much, where do we begin? And let's start with the most important spoke on the wheel: connection before correction. I think this may be the most important spoke on the entire family relationships wheel. Connection before correction. Let me know in the chat. Type yes in the chat if you have ever found yourself correcting your child within the first 5 minutes of seeing them after school. Hang your coat up, take your shoes off. Why haven't you brought your reading book home? Type yes if that's you. Because you're not alone, and I want to tell you a story. One morning, one of my own children proudly came downstairs fully dressed and ready for school. But my brain immediately noticed a problem. You see, they were wearing their school uniform. The difficulty was, it wasn't a normal school day, it was their fencing day, and they should have been wearing their fencing kit. So my immediate instinct was correction. No, you've got the wrong clothes on. But then I stopped. Because what my child had actually done was something wonderful. They had independently got themselves dressed. So instead, I said, "Wow, you've done brilliantly getting yourself ready all by yourself," and their face lit up. But there's one small thing. Today is actually fencing day. Should we get changed together? Same outcome, very different journey. Connection before correction. Now, please don't misunderstand me. Children do need boundaries. They do need guidance. And children do need correction. But correction works best when it sits on a foundation of connection. Now, I sometimes ask parents to imagine a relationship bank account. Every smile, every cuddle, every shared joke, every moment of connection, every moment of curiosity is a deposit. Like putting money into a bank account, we can make positive deposits in the relationship bank account. On the other side of the ledger, constant criticism, conflict, correction, and demands, disconnection, these are withdrawals. The problem comes when family life becomes dominated by withdrawals, because children who feel criticized often become defensive, and defensive children are much harder to influence. Strong relationships are built in ordinary moments. Conversations in the car, walking the dog, bedtime chats, playing games, sitting side by side, shared humour. Connection does not need to be complicated. It simply needs to be intentional. I think becoming a parent has taught me something important. Children rarely remember our perfect parenting moments. They remember how we made them feel. And if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this: connection before correction, because children are far more likely to accept our influence when they feel connected to us. Which brings us to our next spoke, understanding behaviour. So let's move on to the second spoke on the family relationships confidence wheel, understanding behaviour. And I think this may be one of the most important shifts that families can make. Let me know in the chat, how many people here have ever found yourselves thinking, why on earth is my child behaving like this? Type yes if that's you. I think every parent listening to this has asked that question at some point. When children behave in ways that are challenging, frustrating, or confusing, our natural instinct is often to focus on the behaviour itself. How do we stop it? How do we reduce it? How do we change it? But over the years, I've come to believe that one of the most powerful questions we can ask is not how do I stop this behaviour, but what is this behaviour trying to tell me? Because behaviour is communication. Children communicate through behaviour for many reasons. Sometimes they are anxious. Sometimes they are overwhelmed. Sometimes they are tired, hungry, sensory overloaded, frustrated, or simply lacking the skills to cope with a difficult situation. I often use the analogy of an iceberg. Behaviour is the part of the iceberg above the water. It is the part we can see. But underneath the surface may sit anxiety, sensory differences, communication difficulties, executive functioning challenges, low self-esteem, social struggles, fatigue, or emotional overwhelm. And if we only focus on the behaviour, we risk missing the reasons behind it. I remember meeting one family whose son regularly exploded after school. School reported that he was coping well. The parents were understandably exhausted and confused. Every evening at home seemed to end in conflict. As we explored things further, it became clear that the child had spent the whole school day holding everything together, masking, managing, trying desperately to cope. By the time he arrived home, he had nothing left. The behaviour wasn't defiance, it was overwhelm. Understanding that changed everything. The family moved from asking, how do we stop these meltdowns, to asking, what does our child need when they come home? And that led to practical changes, less questioning immediately after school, more downtime, more predictability, more connection. I often say children do well when they can, and when they can't, our job is to ask why. Now, this does not mean that we ignore behaviour. Children still need boundaries. They still need guidance. They still need expectations. But understanding behaviour helps us respond more efficiently. Because when we understand the reasons beneath behaviour, we are much more likely to respond with curiosity rather than anger, compassion rather than blame, and support rather than punishment alone. I think becoming a parent has taught me something important. The more we understand our children, the more compassion we tend to feel, and compassion changes relationships. So if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this. Behaviour is communication, and understanding the message is the first step towards meaningful change. Which brings us to our next spoke, boundaries and expectations. So let's move on to the third spoke in the family relationships confidence wheel, boundaries and expectations. Now, whenever I talk about connection, there is usually somebody thinking, that all sounds lovely, Harry, but my child still needs boundaries. And I completely agree. Children absolutely need boundaries. In fact, boundaries are incredibly important because boundaries create safety, predictability, and security. Safety so that children feel protected, predictability so they know what to expect, and security so they have confidence to explore. I think one of the biggest misconceptions in parenting is the idea that connection and boundaries are opposites. They aren't. Children need both. Please, if you can, let me know in the chat how many people here have ever worried that you are either being too strict or not strict enough. Type yes in the chat if that's you. Are you being too strict? Do you worry that you're not being strict enough? I think most parents worry about that at some point. I certainly have. Parenting constantly feels like trying to find the sweet spot. Too much control and relationships suffer. Too little structure and family life can become chaotic. So I often think about parenting like the banks of a river. A river needs banks. Without them, the water spreads everywhere. But if the banks become too rigid, the river cannot flow. Children are very similar. They need warmth, connection, and flexibility. But they also need boundaries, expectations, and structure. I remember meeting one family who described home life as constant negotiation. Everything was a battle. Bedtime, homework, screens, getting out of the house. The parents were exhausted, and the child was exhausted too. As we explored things together, it became clear that expectations changed from day to day. Sometimes screens were allowed, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes bedtime mattered, sometimes it didn't. The child genuinely didn't know what to expect. Children generally cope better when expectations are clear, predictable, and consistent. Not perfect, consistent. Now, consistency is hard, very hard, especially when you're tired or stressed or trying to parent several children simultaneously. Please don't hear me saying that parents should be robots. None of us are. But children thrive when the important rules remain relatively stable, because predictability reduces anxiety and predictability reduces conflict. One strategy I often recommend is to identify your non-negotiables. Ask yourself, what really matters in our family? Perhaps it's kindness, safety, respect, sleep, boundaries around screens. Focus on the things that matter most, because if everything becomes a battle, everybody loses. I have certainly learned as a parent that not every hill is worth dying on. Sometimes preserving the relationship matters more than winning the argument. And if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this. Boundaries and connection are not opposites. Children need both. Which brings us to our next spoke, conflict and power struggles. So let's talk about the fourth spoke on the family relationships confidence wheel, conflict and power struggles. I suspect every parent listening to this knows exactly what a power struggle feels like. Let me know. Type me in the chat if you have ever become involved in an argument with your child and suddenly realised we're both now arguing about something that doesn't actually matter anymore. Type me if that's you in the chat, because it certainly is me. I think one of the greatest ironies of parenting is that children and parents often become locked in battles that nobody really wants. And once those battles begin, they can be very difficult to escape. I remember one family describing every morning as warfare. Everybody was shouting. Everybody was upset. Nobody enjoyed mornings. The original issue had long been forgotten. What remained was a battle for control. I think it is important to remember that many neurodivergent children experience life with relatively little control. Adults decide when to wake up, what to wear, where to go, what to eat, what to learn, when to stop, when to start. And for children who already feel overwhelmed, a struggle for control can sometimes emerge. Now, I'm not suggesting that children should always get their own way. Far from it. But I do think we should ask ourselves, is this a problem to solve or a power struggle to win? Because those are very different things. Whenever possible, offer choices. Would you like to brush your teeth before or after your story? Would you like to do homework at the kitchen table or in the dining room? Choice increases autonomy, and autonomy often reduces conflict. Another helpful strategy is to avoid escalating. When emotions rise, our instinct is often to become louder, more insistent, more forceful. Unfortunately, children usually do exactly the same. Escalation breeds escalation. Calm breeds calm. I've certainly found myself becoming involved in arguments as a parent and later wondering, why did I keep going? Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is pause, take a breath, and choose not to enter the battle, because not every invitation to fight needs to be accepted. If I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this. Ask yourself, is this a problem to solve or a power struggle to win? Very often, that question changes everything. And family relationships extend beyond parents and children, which brings us to our next spoke, siblings and family dynamics. So let's move on to our fifth spoke on the family relationships confidence wheel, siblings and family dynamics. I think this is one of the most important and often least talked about spokes on the wheel, because when one child is struggling, the whole family is affected. Parents are affected, siblings are affected, relationships are affected. Everybody feels it. Let me know in the chat how many people here have ever worried about the impact of one child's needs on the rest of the family. Yes, you're not alone. I think one of the most common things parents say to me is, I feel guilty. Guilty that one child needs so much time. Guilty that siblings sometimes miss out. Guilty that family life doesn't look the way they imagined it would. And I want to say something very clearly. Feeling guilty does not mean you are getting it wrong. It means you care. I remember meeting one family where the sibling said something incredibly powerful. They said, I know my brother doesn't mean it when he shouts, but sometimes I wish things were easier. I think many siblings feel two things at the same time: love and frustration, compassion and resentment, pride and sadness. And all of those feelings are okay because siblings are human too. One of the most helpful things we can do is create opportunities for open conversations. Conversations where siblings can say, "This is hard. I feel left out. I feel worried. I feel angry," without feeling guilty for having those feelings. Another helpful strategy is to try to create individual moments of connection with each child. And I appreciate that this can be incredibly difficult, particularly when life is busy. But strong relationships are often built in small moments. 10 minutes reading together, a walk, a trip to the shops, a conversation in the car, shared humour. Small moments matter. I also think it is important for children to understand differences. Fair does not always mean equal. Sometimes children need different things, different support, different expectations, different accommodations, and that is okay. I often explain this to families using the analogy of eyesight. If one child needs glasses, we don't insist that everybody else should wear glasses too. We provide what each child needs. Families are no different. Now, I also want to acknowledge something else. Parenting neurodivergent children can place enormous strain on adult relationships. Exhaustion, disagreements, different parenting styles, stress, worry, these things affect couples, and they affect wider family relationships too. Please remember, you and your partner are on the same team, even when it doesn't feel like it. I think becoming a parent has taught me that family life is messy, wonderfully messy. No family gets it right all the time. None. The goal is not a perfect family. The goal is a connected family. So if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this: strong families are not families who never struggle. Strong families are families who keep reconnecting. Which brings us to our next spoke: parent well-being. So let's move on to the sixth spoke on our family relationships confidence wheel, parent well-being. I think this may be the spoke that parents are most likely to ignore: parent well-being, because many parents tell me, "I don't have time for myself. My child comes first. I'll look after myself when things settle down." Let me know in the chat how many people here find it easier to be compassionate towards your child than towards yourself. Type yes if that's you. Because parenting neurodivergent children can be joyful, extraordinary, wonderful, but it can also be exhausting, emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting, mentally exhausting. And if you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and running on empty, it becomes much harder to offer calm, patience, and connection to your child. Parents often feel uncomfortable hearing this. Self-care can sound selfish. I want to suggest something different. Self-care is not selfish. It is essential. I often think about the safety briefing on an aeroplane. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Not because you matter more, but because you cannot effectively help anybody if you cannot breathe. Now, when I say self-care, I'm not necessarily talking about spa days, although if somebody would like to arrange one for me, I would be delighted. I'm talking about the basics: sleep, food, movement, friendship, rest, connection, the time to think, the time to recover. I think one of the most humbling things about parenting is recognizing our own limits. There have absolutely been moments as a parent when I have become less patient because I was tired, less thoughtful because I was stressed, less regulated because I was overwhelmed. And recognizing that isn't weakness, it's honesty. Remember, children borrow our calm before they develop their own, which means our own well-being matters, not because we need to become perfect, but because we need enough emotional reserves to keep showing up. I would encourage you to ask yourself one question: what fills my cup? And perhaps even more importantly, when did I last do it? Because we cannot pour from an empty cup. So please hear this: you matter too. Your well-being matters. Your relationships matter. Your needs matter. And if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this: looking after yourself is not taking something away from your child. It is giving something to them. Because when parents are supported, children benefit. Which brings us to our next spoke: communication and trust. So let's now move to our seventh spoke on the family relationships confidence wheel: communication and trust. Communication and trust sit at the heart of every strong relationship. And yet communication is often one of the first things to suffer when family life becomes stressful. Please let me know in the chat how many people here have ever reached the end of a long day and realized that most of your conversations with your child have involved instructions. Hurry up, take your shoes off, tidy your room, do your homework. Type yes if that sounds like you. Because again, you're not alone. When families are under pressure, communication can quickly become transactional. We become managers, organizers, problem solvers, and somewhere along the way, we sometimes forget simply to connect. I remember one parent saying to me, I miss talking to my child. Not because they had stopped speaking, but because every conversation had become about behavior, school, homework, or conflict. And I think that is incredibly sad, because communication is about so much more than exchanging information. Communication is how relationships grow. Communication is how trust develops. Communication is how children learn that they are safe, seen, heard, and understood. I often encourage families to create moments where conversation can happen naturally. Many children communicate best side by side rather than face to face. So walking the dog, driving in the car, cooking together, movement unlocks words. Side by side, no eye contact needed. Shared tasks allows time for open chat. Some of the most important conversations with my own children have happened when we weren't trying to have important conversations. Children often talk when they feel safe, not when they feel interrogated. And I suspect many parents recognize the experience of asking, "How was school?" and receiving the wonderfully detailed answer, "Fine." Sometimes we need better questions. Instead of "How was school?" try, "What made you smile today? What was the hardest part of today? Who did you spend time with? What are you looking forward to tomorrow?" Trust grows when children feel listened to, and listening does not always mean agreeing. Children need to know that difficult feelings are welcome, that worries can be shared, that mistakes can be discussed, and that emotions can be expressed safely. I think one of the most powerful things a parent can say is, tell me more. Because curiosity builds connection. Now, this does not mean children will always talk. Some children communicate through behaviour, some through play, some through humour, some through silence. Our job is not to force communication. Our job is to create the conditions in which communication feels safe. Trust is not built in one big conversation. Trust is built in thousands of small moments. So if I could leave you with just one message from this section, it would be this. Children are far more likely to talk when they feel safe, connected, and understood. Which brings us to our final spoke, support and repair. So now let's move on to the 8th spoke on the family relationships confidence wheel, support and repair. I think this may be one of the most liberating spokes on the entire wheel. Support and repair, because every parent gets it wrong. Every single one of us. Now, let me know in the chat how many people here have ever lost your temper with your child and immediately wished you could rewind time. Me too. Parenting is wonderfully humbling. And if I'm honest, there have absolutely been moments when I have been not the parent I wanted to be. Moments when I've reacted rather than responded. Moments when I've been tired, stressed, overwhelmed. Moments when afterwards I have thought, I wish I'd handled that differently. For many years, I thought good parenting meant getting things right. I don't believe that anymore. I think good parenting is much more about repair, because relationships are remarkably resilient. Children do not need perfect parents. They need parents who keep showing up, parents who are willing to reflect, parents who are willing to reconnect, parents who are willing to say, I'm sorry. I think one of the most powerful things a parent can model is this. I got that wrong. I'm sorry. Let's try again. What an extraordinary lesson for children, that mistakes are part of being human, that relationships can survive conflict, that love remains even when things are hard. I remember one family where conflict had become so frequent that everybody had stopped trying to reconnect afterwards. Arguments happened, people withdrew, and everybody carried the hurt. When they began intentionally repairing after conflict, something changed. Not because conflict disappeared, but because the family stopped getting stuck there. Repair might look like a conversation, a hug, a note, a shared activity, a simple acknowledgement. I love you, said simply and sincerely. I think this is especially important for parents of neurodivergent children, because family life can be intense. There will be difficult days. There will be arguments. There will be moments when everybody feels overwhelmed. That is normal. The goal is not perfection. The goal is repair. Please remember, one difficult day does not define a relationship. One argument does not define a relationship. One mistake does not define a relationship. Relationships are built over years through repeated experiences of love, connection, and repair. And if I could leave you with one message from this section, it would be this. The goal is not perfection. The goal is repair. So let's think about how we intentionally strengthen family relationships over time. And I did say we were finished and that we touched all 8 spokes, but I want to give you an extra special bonus for being here to the end. So let's move on to the extra bonus spoke on the family relationships wheel, strengthening relationships. And I think this extra bonus spoke is enormously hopeful. Relationships need. And I want you to think about how you would finish that sentence. Relationships need what? Type it in the chat. What do relationships need? And we'll come back to that question in a moment, because relationships are not fixed. Relationships can grow. Relationships can heal. Relationships can become stronger. Let me know in the chat how many people here can think of a relationship in your life that has grown stronger through adversity. Put a strength emoji in the chat or type strong if that is you. Relationships often deepen through difficult experiences. Families are no different. I think one of the greatest myths in parenting is that strong families never struggle. That simply isn't true. Strong families struggle all the time. The difference is that they keep reconnecting. Strong relationships are rarely built during the big moments. They are built during ordinary moments. Conversations in the car, shared jokes, walking the dog, family traditions, bedtime chats, sitting together at mealtimes, watching films, laughing together. Small moments matter. And I asked you earlier to consider, what do relationships need? And I sometimes ask families to think about their relationships as gardens. They're the picture of some trees. And like a garden, relationships need attention, time, care, and investment. Neglected gardens become overgrown. Relationships are no different. I would encourage you to ask yourself, what helps my child feel connected to me? For some children, it is play. For others, it is conversation or physical affection. For others, it's shared interests, humour, or simply your time, your curiosity. Connection does not need to be expensive or complicated. Very often, it is the simplest moments that children remember. I suspect that if we asked adults here what they remember most about their own childhoods, very few would mention perfectly tidy houses or immaculate routines. They would talk about feeling loved, feeling safe, feeling understood. And that is what we are trying to create. Not perfect families, connected families. So if I could leave you with one final message, it would be this. Children may forget many of the things we say, but they rarely forget how we made them feel. So keep showing up, keep reconnecting, keep repairing, keep choosing connection, because relationships really do change everything. And that really does bring us to the end of our journey around the family relationships wheel. So as we come towards the end of our time together today, I'd like you to look back at the family relationships wheel one last time. At first glance, it can feel overwhelming. 8 spokes, 8 important areas, 8 opportunities to strengthen family relationships. But I don't want you to leave today thinking that you need to work on all 8. You don't. In fact, I strongly encourage you not to try. Instead, I'd like you to think about the child you pictured at the very beginning. Picture them again. Picture their face, their smile, their personality, the things that make them uniquely them. Now look at the wheel. Without overthinking it, point to the spoke that feels most relevant to your family right now. Keep your finger there. That is your starting point. Not 8 spokes, 1. Just 1. Because strong family relationships are not built by trying to change everything at once. They are built one moment at a time. 1 conversation, 1 cuddle, 1 apology, 1 shared laugh, 1 repaired relationship, 1 moment of connection. That is how families move from chaos to confidence, 1 spoke at a time. Before you leave today, I'd like to ask one small favour. Please take out your phone and scan the QR code on the screen. When you scan the code, you'll receive my Family Connection Starter Pack. Inside, you'll find practical tools to help you strengthen relationships at home, including the Family Relationships Confidence Wheel, the Relationship Bank Account Worksheet, 30 simple connection ideas for busy families, a special time planner, repair conversation scripts, a power struggle decision tool, and practical communication prompts you can begin using today. And as always, no pressure, no obligation, just support, because every family is different and the support you need should reflect that. And by telling me which spoke feels most relevant to your family, you'll also help shape the future resources I create, so they are based on the challenges real families are facing. I would genuinely love to continue this conversation. One final thought: if you forget everything I've said today except one thing, I hope it's this: children are far more likely to accept our influence when they feel connected to us. Relationships are not built through perfect parenting. Relationships are built through thousands of ordinary moments, moments of connection, moments of curiosity, moments of laughter, moments of repair. Children do not need perfect parents. They need parents who keep showing up, parents who keep learning, parents who keep reconnecting, parents who continue to choose connection even when family life is hard. Because relationships really do change everything. So please be kind to yourselves. Keep choosing connection before correction. Celebrate the small wins. Remember, the goal is not perfection. The goal is repair. Thank you. Thank you very much. It has been a privilege to spend this time with you, and I wish you and your family every success on your journey from chaos to confidence.